There was a man no one believed in. No money, no future, no one to call family. Even the world didn't expect anything from him. But what he became made the same world stop and look back. And this is where it all began. Chapter 1. The name the world forgot. They didn't remember his name, not because it was difficult, not because it was foreign or strange, but because, in their eyes, it simply didn't matter enough to hold on to. He was the kind of person the world learns to blur out without even trying. Not important enough to remember, not dangerous enough to fear, not successful enough to admire, just existing. A background figure in a world that moves too fast to notice people who don't keep up. To most of them, he wasn't a person with a story. He was just that guy, the one who always stood slightly outside every circle. Not because he chose to be there, but because no circle ever really opened for him. He watched life the way someone watches rain through glass, close enough to see everything, too far to touch any of it. There were days he tried to step forward, to speak more, to be seen more, but every attempt felt like speaking into noise that didn't slow down for him. So eventually he stopped trying to interrupt the world and started observing it instead. One afternoon, like so many others, he stood outside a small convenience store. The kind of place where people come and go without looking at each other. He wasn't doing anything unusual, just existing in a space that didn't require him to matter. A man walked out of the store holding a drink, glanced at him, then paused. There was a second of recognition, or maybe just familiarity. Then the man smirked. "You again?" He didn't respond immediately, not because he didn't hear, but because he was used to deciding whether a response was even worth the energy. The man tilted his head slightly. "Don't you ever get tired of this life?" That question wasn't asked with curiosity. It was asked with comfort. The comfort of someone who already believes they are better off than you. He looked at the ground for a moment, then slowly raised his eyes. His voice was calm, almost flat. "I don't have another one." There was no anger in it, no defense, just fact. The man laughed lightly, shaking his head as if he had heard something mildly amusing. "That's sad." A pause, not heavy, just empty. He shrugged slightly. "Yeah, I know." And just like that, the man turned and walked away. No follow-up, no second thought, no curiosity about what kind of life produces a sentence like that. He disappeared into the flow of people like nothing had happened. But for him, something had. Because the moment didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel like insult or confrontation. It felt worse. It felt like being irrelevant in real time. He stayed standing there long after the man was gone, watching people pass, watching life continue, watching how easily the world removed him from its attention. And that was the part that lingered. Not the laughter, not the comment, not even the judgment, but the silence that followed it. The kind of silence that tells you no one is coming back to check on you, that no one is going to ask what happens next. Because sometimes what breaks a person isn't hate, it's not cruelty, it's not even rejection, it's indifference. The quiet realization that you could disappear tomorrow. And for most people, nothing in their day would change. He looked down at his hands for a moment, then back at the street. And for the first time, a thought formed. Not loud, not emotional, not even fully conscious. Just clear. If the world doesn't notice me, then I either disappear quietly or I become impossible to ignore. And he didn't know it yet. But that thought was the first crack in everything he used to believe about his life. Chapter 2. Life Without a Floor. Nights were cold, not just in temperature, but in feeling. The kind of cold that settles deeper than skin. Days were uncertain, but not in an exciting way. There was no mystery to solve, no adventure, waiting around the corner. Just repetition. Wake up, walk, wait, sleep, repeat. Time didn't feel like it was moving forward. It felt like it was circling around him, like he was stuck inside a version of life that never updated. He slept where he could, sometimes on benches, sometimes in corners where people didn't look too closely, sometimes just sitting upright because lying down felt too exposed. And every morning, when he opened his eyes, there was always the same quiet question waiting for him. Where now? But there was never a real answer, because nowhere is still a direction when you have nothing. One night, the city felt louder than usual. Cars passing, footsteps echoing, voices blending into distance. But inside him, everything was quiet. Too quiet. He sat under a flickering street light that kept turning on and off like it couldn't decide if it wanted to stay alive. In that light, everything looked temporary, even him. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, and whispered to himself, without even realizing he was speaking out loud. Is this all there is? The question didn't expect an answer, but he still waited. A few seconds passed, then a few more. Nothing. Only the sound of distant movement. Only the rhythm of a world continuing without him. He smiled faintly, almost ashamed of asking it, as if even the question itself was naive. Then a voice broke through the silence. Not loud, not dramatic, just nearby. You're thinking too loud. He turned his head. An older man sat a few feet away. Worn clothes, tired posture. The kind of person the world also stops noticing after a while. He hadn't looked at him while speaking, just stared forward, as if talking to the street itself. He blinked. What does that mean? The older man shifted slightly, still not fully facing him. Means you're stuck in your head instead of moving. A pause. The words weren't harsh, but they landed heavy anyway. He let out a small laugh, more out of disbelief than humor. Moving where? Finally, the older man turned his head, looked at him properly for the first time. There was no judgment in his eyes, no sympathy either, just exhaustion. Like someone who had asked the same question before, and stopped expecting an answer. He said simply, "Anywhere else?" Silence. That answer should have been useless. It wasn't advice, it wasn't guidance, it wasn't even clear. But it stayed with him longer than anything else that night. Because sometimes clarity doesn't come in solutions, it comes in exits. He looked down at the ground, then back at the street. Cars kept passing, people kept moving, life kept continuing like it always did. The older man adjusted his position, stood up slowly, stretching his back like everything hurt more than it should, and without saying anything else, he began to walk away. No explanation, no farewell, no instruction, just movement, just distance growing between them. He watched him leave, and for the first time in a long time, something inside him shifted, not because he was inspired, but because he realized something uncomfortable. Everyone keeps moving, even the people who look like they have nothing, even the people who seem lost, even the people who don't have a plan. They still move, and he was still sitting. That night didn't give him hope. It didn't fix anything. It didn't suddenly make life clearer, but it planted something small and sharp inside him, a question that didn't leave easily. If nothing changes here, why am I still here? The streetlight flickered again. On, off, on, and for the first time, he didn't just watch it. He started thinking about what it would feel like to move away from it. Chapter 3. The night everything cracked. That night, he didn't sleep, not even a little. The city outside kept moving like nothing mattered. Cars passed, voices faded, lights shifted from one building to another, but inside his head, everything was loud, too loud. He replayed everything, every failure that made him smaller, every insult that made him quieter. Every moment he chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. At first it was just memories. Then it became something heavier. Regret. He sat on the edge of his bed, or what passed as one, and stared at the floor like it had answers. Hours passed, without him noticing. Then finally, in a voice barely above air, he whispered, "Maybe I'm just not meant for anything." The words didn't feel emotional. They felt final, like a conclusion he had avoided for too long. Long silence followed. No dramatic moment, no sudden inspiration, just emptiness stretching out in front of him. Then something inside him shifted. Not hope, not motivation. Something sharper, frustration, clarity, the kind that doesn't comfort you, but forces you to move anyway. He stood up so suddenly the chair behind him scraped the floor, a sound too loud for how quiet the room felt. He paused, breathing heavier now, and then, almost like he was testing the sound of his own voice, he said, "If nothing is changing here, beat." He looked around the room like it had been lying to him, then continued, "Then I leave here." Silence. He let out a short laugh, one breath of air that didn't feel happy. It felt real, because for the first time, he wasn't reacting to life. He was choosing something inside it, and that terrified him more than anything before. Chapter 4. The First Step. Morning came too fast, the kind of morning that doesn't wait for recovery, the kind that arrives whether you're ready or not. He hadn't slept, but he still got up. No plan, no destination, no idea what leaving even meant beyond the word itself. Just movement. He packed nothing, because there was nothing to pack. He stood at the edge of the area he had always known, streets he had walked 1,000 times without ever really belonging to. A guard noticed him. Same routine, same question. "Where are you going?" He stopped. For a second, he almost said nothing. Almost went back to silence. But something in him refused that now. He exhaled. "Forward." The guard frowned slightly. "That's not an answer." He didn't look away this time. "It's the only one I have." A long pause followed. The kind where even authority feels uncertain. The guard studied him for a moment longer than necessary. Then, without explanation, he stepped aside. Not because he understood, but because something about the answer didn't feel like it needed permission. He walked through, and every step after that felt like leaving a version of himself behind. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Chapter 5. The World Doesn't Care. The world outside didn't change for him, not at first. It rarely does. He worked anything he could find. Anything. Jobs that didn't ask questions. Jobs that didn't care who you were before you arrived, only what you could do right now. Some days were long enough to blur time. Other days felt like they were designed to test how much silence a person could survive. One supervisor watched him one afternoon and said, "You're not really cut out for this life." No emotion. Just observation, like stating weather. He wiped sweat from his face slowly, looked at the ground for a second, then replied, "Then I'll become someone who is." The supervisor let out a short laugh. "That's not how it works." He nodded, not arguing, not defending, just accepting the statement. Then quietly said, "I know." Beat, then added, "That's why I'm still here." Silence followed that, because there was nothing left to respond with. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. No applause, no recognition, no moment where the world suddenly confirmed he was on the right path. Only repetition. Wake up, work, fail, adjust, repeat. But something strange happens when repetition lasts long enough. It stops being something you do and starts becoming who you are. He didn't notice it happening, not at first, but slowly without announcement. His posture changed. His patience changed. His tolerance for quitting changed, not because life got easier, but because he stopped expecting it to be. And in that quiet acceptance, something deeper than success was forming. Identity. Chapter 6. Invisible Progress. People didn't notice everything at once. It never works like that. There was no moment where the world suddenly turned and said, he's different now. Instead, it was smaller, almost invisible. First, it was the way he showed up every day. Not excited, not motivated, just consistent. Then it was the way he didn't complain anymore. Not because things got easier, but because complaining stopped changing anything. A coworker watched him one afternoon and finally asked, "Why don't you quit like everyone else?" He didn't look surprised by the question. He kept working while answering, "Because quitting doesn't solve anything." Beat. Then he added, "It just delays the same problem." The coworker frowned slightly, like the answer didn't fit what they expected. Another day, someone else asked him something similar. A quieter moment. Late afternoon, tired voices, empty air between tasks. "Do you ever feel like it's not working?" He stopped for a second, just a second. Then he smiled faintly.